Princess Zyra pressed her back against the rough bark of a massive tree. Her skin, once bright blue like the morning sky, now looked gray and dull. 3 weeks had passed since her father threw her out of the palace. 3 weeks of hiding in the dark shadowbark forest like a common criminal. Her stomach hurt from hunger. The small berries she found yesterday were not enough. Her people, the Velthari, never needed to hunt for food. Their cities had machines that made everything they needed, but here in the wild forest, those machines could not help her. Zyra touched the crystal pendant around her neck. It was the only thing she had left from home. The crystal used to glow with warm light, connected to the great network that linked all Velthari minds. Now it was dark and cold, just like her. She remembered the last day in the palace. Her father, Emperor Kethvar, sat on his throne made of living crystal. His eyes burned with anger. "You will marry War Commander Thex," he had said. His voice echoed through the throne room. "The hegemony offers us protection. This marriage will make our alliance strong." Zyra had stood before him, her hands shaking. "Father, I do not love him. He is cruel. His people destroy worlds for fun." "Love?" Her father laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Love is for children. You are a princess. Your duty is to your people. My duty is to protect our people, not sell them to monsters." That was when her father's face turned red with rage. "You dare disobey me? You shame our family name?" The guards had dragged her away. Her father's last words still hurt her heart. "You are no daughter of mine. Go live with the beasts in the forest. Maybe they will teach you respect." Now Zyra sat alone in that forest. The shadowbark trees grew so thick that little sunlight reached the ground. Strange sounds came from the darkness between the trees. She had seen moving shadows that might be predators, or worse, hegemony soldiers looking for her. War Commander Thex would not give up easily. He wanted to marry her to gain control of the Velthari Empire. If he could not have her as a wife, he would take her as a prisoner. Either way, her people would suffer. Zyra tried to stand up, but her legs felt weak. She had not eaten a real meal in days. Her people were tall and thin, built for life in crystal cities, not for surviving in wild places. Their technology did everything for them. They never learned to make fire or hunt animals or find clean water. She looked at her hands. Once they had controlled powerful machines with just a thought. The bio-implants in her palms could connect to any Velthari device. But here, with no devices around, her hands were just hands, weak and useless. A branch snapped somewhere in the forest. Zyra froze. Was someone coming? She pressed herself closer to the tree, trying to become invisible. Her heart beat so fast she thought it might burst. Heavy footsteps moved through the forest. Not the light steps of her people. Not the metal boots of hegemony soldiers either. Something else. "Where are you, princess?" A rough voice called out. "War Commander Thex grows tired of waiting. Hegemony soldiers, they had found her hiding place. The commander promises you will be treated well," another voice said. "Come out now and save yourself pain." Zyra bit her lip to stop herself from crying. She knew what Thex's promises were worth. He had destroyed 3 worlds to prove his power. He would make her watch her people suffer before he killed them all. The soldiers moved closer. Zyra could see their red armor between the trees. They carried weapons that could burn through stone. She had nowhere to run. "Search every tree," the first soldier ordered. She cannot have gone far. These crystal people die quickly without their machines. They were right. Zyra felt death creeping closer every day. Her body was giving up. Soon she would be too weak to hide. Then Thex would have her, but she would not go quietly. Her father called her weak, but he was wrong. She had learned something in the forest that palace life never taught her. She had learned to hate. She hated her father for choosing politics over love. She hated Thex for his cruelty. She hated her own people for being too weak to fight back. Most of all, She hated herself for running away instead of standing up to them all. The soldiers were very close now. Zaira could smell the oil on their weapons. She closed her eyes and prepared to die fighting. Then she heard something that changed everything. A new sound cut through the forest noise. It was loud and terrible, like metal screaming. It came from the sky, growing louder and louder. The hegemony soldiers stopped searching. They looked up at the sky through the tree branches. "What is that?" one of them asked. The screaming sound grew into a roar. Something big was falling from the sky, very fast. "Take cover!" the soldier leader shouted. The thing in the sky crashed into the forest with a sound like thunder. The ground shook. Trees fell. Zaira heard the soldiers running away, their armor clanking as they fled. When the noise stopped, Zaira slowly opened her eyes. Smoke rose from somewhere deeper in the forest. Whatever had fallen from the sky was big, and it was burning. She should run away. The crash would bring more soldiers, more danger. But something made her curious. What kind of ship could survive a crash like that? None of her people's ships were built for such violence. Zaira forced her weak legs to carry her toward the smoke. She moved carefully, staying hidden behind trees. As she got closer, she could see the crashed ship through the smoke. It was not like any ship she had ever seen. It was small and ugly, made of rough metal instead of crystal or energy fields. Part of it was buried in the ground. One wing had broken off completely, but someone was moving inside the wreckage. Zaira watched from behind a tree as a figure climbed out of the broken ship. It was smaller than a Velthari. Smaller than a hegemony soldier, too. It wore strange clothes and had short, dark hair. The figure looked around at the crashed ship and said something in a language Zaira did not know. But she could hear the tone. It was not fear or panic. It sounded almost annoyed, like someone who had dealt with crashes before. Zaira had never seen anything like this small, tough-looking creature. But she had a feeling her lonely days in the forest were about to end. Captain Marcus Chen pulled himself out of the smoking wreckage of his ship and looked around. The forest was dark and thick with huge trees. His ship had cut a long path through them before stopping. Lucky the trees were so big and strong, or the crash would have killed him. He checked his body for injuries. A few cuts and bruises, but nothing broken. His military training had taught him to stay calm in bad situations. This was just another problem to solve. Marcus walked around his ship to see the damage. The hull was cracked in 3 places. The main engine was completely destroyed. The communication system sparked and went silent as he watched. No way to call for help. "Well, this is not good," he said to himself. He had been exploring this sector when hegemony fighters attacked his ship. Their weapons had some kind of virus that corrupted his ship's computer. The AI started giving wrong information and trying to fly into a star. Marcus had to shut down all the smart systems and fly manually. That was when he learned about the planet below. His damaged sensors showed forests and water. Good enough for an emergency landing. Though landing was too nice a word for what just happened. Marcus opened the emergency supply box. Food for 1 week. Water purification tablets. Basic medical kit. Survival knife. Fire starter. Not much. But he had survived with less. He looked up at the sky through the trees. It was getting dark. First rule of survival: find shelter, water, and fire. Everything else could wait. Marcus found a good spot near a stream about 50 meters from his ship. The water ran clear over smooth rocks. He tested it with a purification tablet and waited for the color to change. Clean water, one problem solved. Next, he gathered dry wood from fallen branches. The shadowbark trees had thick bark that peeled off in long strips, perfect for starting fires. Within an hour, he had a small fire burning in a circle of stones. As darkness fell, Marcus heard sounds in the forest. Not just wind and insects. Something bigger moving through the trees. He was not alone here. He took his survival knife and climbed a tree near his camp. From up there, he could see better. Strange shapes moved in the darkness between the trees. They stayed away from his fire, but they were watching him. Marcus had studied many alien worlds. Most predators feared fire. It was one reason humans learned to make fire so long ago. Fire meant safety, warmth, and the ability to cook food. Basic survival, but it worked on any world. He climbed down and added more wood to the fire. Then he started working on his shelter. Using pieces from his crashed ship, branches, and strips of bark, he built a lean-to against a big tree. It would keep him dry if it rained. While he worked, Marcus thought about his situation. His mission was to map this sector and report back to Earth Fleet. The hegemony was expanding into this area, taking over peaceful worlds. Someone had to warn the other species about what was coming. The hegemony fighters had been waiting for him. Someone told them he was coming. That meant they had spies in Earth Fleet, or they had broken human codes. Either way, Marcus was on his own now. He finished his shelter and sat by the fire to eat. Military ration bars were not tasty, but they had everything his body needed. He ate slowly, making the food last. No telling when he would find more. That was when he heard something different in the forest sounds. Not an animal, footsteps, someone walking, but trying to be quiet. Marcus put out most of his fire, leaving just enough light to see. He took his knife and moved into the shadows. Years of military training made him almost invisible in the darkness. The footsteps came closer. Then Marcus saw who was making them. It was a tall, thin figure with blue skin. Very thin, like it had not eaten in a long time. It wore torn clothes that might have been expensive once. The figure moved carefully, stopping often to listen. Marcus had never seen this species before, but it looked intelligent and desperate. The figure came to the edge of his camp and stared at the fire. It reached toward the warmth, then pulled back like it was afraid. Marcus watched for a few minutes. The creature did not seem dangerous, just hungry and scared. It kept looking over its shoulder like someone was chasing it. Finally, the blue-skinned figure collapsed. It fell forward and did not get up. Marcus waited to make sure this was not a trick. When the figure did not move for several minutes, he came out of hiding. He turned up his fire to give more light and went to check on the stranger. It was female, he could see now. Her skin was cold and her breathing was weak. She was starving. Marcus had seen this before on refugee worlds during the war. People who had not eaten in days. He picked her up easily. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her to his fire and wrapped her in his emergency blanket. Then he heated some water and mixed it with food powder to make a thin soup. When the soup was ready, Marcus gently shook the alien woman awake. Her eyes opened, and she stared at him with fear. "Easy," Marcus said softly. "I will not hurt you." She tried to speak, but only made weak sounds. Marcus offered her the cup of soup. She looked at it suspiciously. "Food," Marcus said, pointing to the cup and then to his mouth. "Eat. Eat," she understood. Her hands shook as she took the cup and drank a little. The warm soup made her cough, but she kept drinking. Marcus sat back and watched her. She had crystal patterns on her skin that caught the firelight. Her clothes were made from some kind of fabric he had never seen. This was no primitive forest dweller. She came from an advanced civilization. When she finished the soup, she looked at Marcus with wide eyes. She pointed to herself and said something in her own language. It sounded like, "Zyra." "Zyra," Marcus repeated, pointing to her. Then he pointed to himself. "Marcus." She tried to say his name, but it came out wrong. Close enough. Zyra looked around the camp. She saw his shelter, his fire, the organized way he had set up everything. She touched the metal cup, the soup came in, then looked at the pieces of spaceship he had used to build his shelter. Marcus could see her mind working. She was realizing that he had survived a spaceship crash and built a working camp in just a few hours. Most species would have died in a crash like that, or at least taken days to recover. She said something in her language and pointed at the forest around them. Her voice sounded frightened. Marcus did not understand her words, but he understood fear. Someone or something was hunting her. That was why she was hiding in the forest, starving instead of going home. He pointed to his camp, then to her, then made a gesture that meant, "Stay here. Safe." Zyra looked at him for a long time. She was deciding if she could trust this strange, small creature who made fire without machines and built shelters from crashed spaceships. Finally, she nodded. Marcus smiled and added more wood to the fire. He had found someone who needed help. And maybe, just maybe, she could help him understand this world and find a way to complete his mission. The forest was full of dangers, but humans had been dealing with dangerous places for thousands of years. This was just another challenge to overcome. Zyra curled up near the fire and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe enough to sleep deeply. Marcus kept watch through the night. Whatever was hunting her, it would have to go through him first. Zyra woke up when the sun came through the trees. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw Marcus adding wood to the fire, and remembered. The strange, small alien had saved her life. Marcus smiled at her and offered a cup of hot soup. "Good morning, Zyra." She took the cup and drank carefully. The soup tasted better than anything she had eaten in weeks. "Thank you," she said in her own language. Marcus pointed to himself and said, "Human." Then he pointed to her with a questioning look. "Velthari," Zyra said, touching her chest. Marcus nodded and repeated the word. He was learning quickly. After breakfast, Marcus showed Zyra around his camp. He had built a water filter using cloth and stones from the stream. He had set up traps to catch small animals. He had even made fishing hooks from pieces of his ship. Zyra watched everything with amazement. Her people had machines to do all of this. They never learned to make things with their hands. But this human could create useful tools from almost nothing. "How?" she asked, pointing to the water filter. Marcus understood her question even though they did not speak the same language. He showed her how the stones and cloth cleaned dirty water. He let her help him check the animal traps. One had caught a small creature like a rabbit. Zyra looked away when Marcus killed the animal quickly and cleanly. Her people ate food made by machines. They never saw where it came from. "Life," Marcus said seriously. He made a gesture that meant respect. "Take only what you need." Zyra began to understand. This human knew that taking life was serious, but he did what was necessary to survive. There was no shame in it. Over the next few days, Marcus taught Zyra many things. How to recognize safe plants to eat. How to find dry wood even after rain. How to read the weather by watching clouds and wind. Zyra was surprised at how quickly she learned. Her people always said they were weak without their technology, but maybe they had just forgotten how to be strong. In return, Zyra taught Marcus about the forest. She showed him which plants were dangerous and which ones could heal wounds. She knew the sounds different animals made and what they meant, but more importantly, she told him about the war that was coming. Using simple words and hand gestures, Zyra explained about her people. The Velthari. They lived in crystal cities and valued peace and knowledge. But they had grown weak and dependent on their machines. She told him about the hegemony, a race of conquerors who destroyed worlds for resources and pleasure. They had offered to protect the Velthari in exchange for total control. "My father," Zyra said, pointing to herself and making a crown gesture with her hands. "Emperor. Wants marriage." She made a disgusted face and pointed into the forest. "War Commander Thex. Cruel. Evil." Marcus understood. Zyra was a princess. Her father wanted her to marry an enemy leader to avoid war. She refused and was exiled. "You were right to say no," Marcus said. Zyra did not understand all his words, but she understood his tone. He respected her choice. This surprised her. Her father had called her foolish and selfish. Her advisors had said she was putting her feelings above her people's safety. But this human stranger thought she had done the right thing. Marcus asked more questions, and slowly Zyra explained the whole situation. The hegemony wanted to use the Velthari's advanced technology for war. War Commander Thex was looking for her to force the marriage. If he found her, her people would become slaves. How many ships does Thex have? Marcus asked. Zyra held up her fingers. 20 ships. Each one could destroy a city. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "We need to stop him." Zyra stared at him in shock. This one small human wanted to fight 20 warships? It was impossible. Even brave. It was crazy, but Marcus was already thinking about the problem. What weapons do the hegemony ships have? What are their weaknesses? Krana, Zyra tried to explain. The hegemony ships were heavily armed but not very smart. They relied on fear and superior numbers. Their computer systems were simple but well protected. Marcus nodded as he listened. He was making plans. That evening, Marcus showed Zyra something that amazed her. He had been working with pieces from his crashed ship, building something new. It looked like a communication device, but different from anything she knew. Radio, Marcus explained. Long-distance talking. He had built it using basic electronics and parts from his ship. No advanced computers or AI systems, just simple technology that worked. Marcus spoke into the device in his own language. He was trying to contact other humans, to warn them about the hegemony expansion. Zyra listened to the strange human sounds. The language had a rhythm that was different from her people's speech. It sounded strong and direct, like Marcus himself. When Marcus finished speaking, he looked frustrated. No answer. Friends far away, he explained to Zyra. Need time to get message. Zyra understood. Help might come, but not soon enough. That night, they sat by the fire and Marcus told Zyra about his people. Humans came from a world called Earth. They had no advanced technology when they started exploring space. They had to build everything themselves, learning through mistakes and hard work. Humans adapt, Marcus said, using a new word. Zyra was learning to understand. Always find a way. He told her about human history. How they survived ice ages and disasters. How they explored dangerous oceans in small boats. How they always kept trying. Even when things looked impossible, Zyra told Marcus about Velthari history. Her people had built amazing cities and made art from living crystal. They had mapped the stars and created beautiful music, but somewhere along the way, they had stopped learning how to be strong. Your people not weak, Marcus said. Just forgot how to fight. Can they remember? Zyra asked. Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. You remembered. Zyra thought about this. In just a few days with Marcus, she had learned to make fire, find food, and think for herself. If she could change, maybe her people could too. The next morning, hegemony soldiers returned to the forest. Zyra heard their armor clanking through the trees, and fear filled her heart. But Marcus was calm. He put out the fire and covered their camp with branches. Then he led Zyra deeper into the forest, moving quietly like a hunter. They look for camp, he whispered. We give them wrong camp. Marcus had prepared for this. He had built a fake campsite in another part of the forest. Old ashes. Some garbage. Signs that someone had been there but left days ago. From their hiding place, they watched the soldiers find the fake camp. The soldiers searched everywhere, but found nothing useful. Princess ran away again, one soldier said. She cannot survive much longer. After the soldiers left, Marcus smiled. They think you are weak. Good. Let them think that. Zyra realized that Marcus was teaching her more than survival skills. He was teaching her how to think like a warrior. Not the kind of warrior who fought with big weapons and heavy armor. The kind who used intelligence and cunning to win against stronger enemies. Why do you help me? Zyra asked that evening. Marcus thought for a moment. Because you tried to do the right thing, even when it was hard. That makes you worth helping. Zyra felt something warm in her chest. This human barely knew her, but he believed in her. He saw strength in her that her own father could not see. For the first time since her exile, Zyra began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to win this fight. Marcus spent the evening making new tools from his ship parts. Each one was designed to help them survive or fight back. Tomorrow, he said, we start real work. Zyra did not know what he meant, but she trusted him. This strange human had already done impossible things. Maybe he could do more. 3 days later, the forest shook with the sound of landing ships. Not just a few soldiers this time. Zyra counted at least 5 ships touching down in a clearing 2 kilometers away. Heavy ships with powerful weapons. They are serious now, Zyra whispered as she and Marcus watched from high in a tree. Marcus studied the ships through a scope he had built from pieces of his crashed vessel. "War Commander Thex?" he asked. Zyra nodded. "The biggest ship. Black with red markings. That is his command vessel." Marcus watched soldiers pouring out of the ships. They wore heavier armor than the scouts from before. They carried energy weapons and scanning equipment. These were not just hunters. This was an army. "How many?" Marcus asked. "Maybe 200 soldiers," Zyra said. "Plus combat mechs. Plus orbital support from ships in space." Marcus was quiet for a long time, still watching through his scope. Zyra expected him to say they should run. Hide somewhere else. Wait for help that might never come. Instead, Marcus climbed down from the tree and started gathering his equipment. "What are you doing?" Zyra asked. "Getting ready for war," Marcus said simply. Zyra stared at him. "Marcus, you cannot fight 200 soldiers. They have weapons that can burn through mountains. They have machines that can track us anywhere." Marcus looked at her with a strange smile. "Zyra, let me tell you about humans and war." He led her to a hidden spot where he had been building things from his ship parts. Zyra had not realized how much work he had been doing. There were devices she did not recognize, containers full of chemicals, and rolls of thin wire. "Humans fought big armies before," Marcus explained as he packed equipment into a backpack. "Sometimes we won." "Want to know how?" "How?" Zyra asked, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. "We did not fight fair." That afternoon, Marcus showed Zyra what he meant. They moved through the forest like ghosts, watching the hegemony soldiers set up their base. The soldiers were efficient but predictable. They followed standard military procedures. Marcus pointed out their mistakes. Guard posts too far apart. Communication lines not protected. Supply area easy to reach. He was studying them the way a hunter studies prey. When darkness fell, Marcus began his campaign. The first target was a supply truck, moving between the landing site and a forward patrol base. Marcus had spent hours learning the route and timing. The truck was armored, but had weak spots. Marcus placed small explosive devices along the road. Not enough to destroy the truck, just enough to damage it and force the crew to stop. When the truck hit the first explosive and broke down, the crew got out to check the damage. That was when Marcus struck from the darkness with a device that made no sound. Both soldiers fell unconscious before they knew what happened. Marcus and Zyra quickly loaded the truck's supplies into their own hiding places. Food, medical supplies, and most importantly, communication equipment. "Why not take their weapons?" Zyra asked. "Too heavy. Too complicated," Marcus explained. "My weapons work better here." The next morning, the hegemony soldiers found their truck and their unconscious crew. The crew could not explain what happened. They remembered stopping to check damage, then waking up hours later. War Commander Thex was not pleased. Zyra heard his angry voice echoing through the forest as he shouted at his officers. "Find them. I want the princess alive, but kill anyone helping her." That night, Marcus hit again. This time, he targeted a communication relay that connected the base to the ships in space. The device looked heavily guarded, but Marcus found a way to approach from underground, through a stream that ran under the relay station. He did not destroy the relay. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he changed it so that some messages would not get through correctly. Orders became confused. Reports got lost. The careful coordination of the hegemony forces began to break down. By the third day, Thex's soldiers were making mistakes. They shot at shadows. They reported seeing enemies where there were none. The constant small attacks and equipment failures were making them nervous and angry. Marcus watched from hiding as Thex himself came to inspect a patrol that had lost half its equipment to traps. War Commander Thex was exactly as Zyra described. Tall, heavily armored, with scars covering his face. He moved like someone who had never lost a fight. "This is not the princess," Thex snarled at his officers. "She is weak. She could not do this." "Commander, maybe she found help," one officer suggested. Thex backhanded the officer, sending him sprawling. "Help? From who? The Velthari are cowards. There is no one else on this world." Marcus smiled in his hiding place. Let them underestimate him. That evening, Thex made a mistake. He sent out a smaller patrol to search the deep forest. Only 10 soldiers, thinking they were hunting a scared princess and maybe some forest animals. Marcus had been waiting for this chance. He led the patrol into a part of the forest where the trees grew very close together. Heavy armor and energy weapons were disadvantages here. The soldiers had to move in single file, along narrow paths. Marcus had spent hours preparing this area. Ropes hidden among the branches. Small explosive charges buried under leaves. False paths that led nowhere. When the patrol entered his trap, Marcus was everywhere and nowhere. A soldier would step on a hidden pressure plate and get tangled in ropes. Another would chase sounds that led him in circles. Equipment would malfunction in ways that seemed like accidents. Within 2 hours, the entire patrol was captured or unconscious. Marcus had not killed anyone, but he had shown them how helpless they were in his forest. When the patrol did not report back, Thex sent search teams to find them. They found the 10 soldiers tied to trees, alive, but embarrassed. Each soldier had a message written on his armor in their own language. "The forest is watching you." Thex was furious. But he was also starting to understand that he was not fighting a scared princess anymore. "Who is helping her?" he demanded from the captured soldiers. "We never saw anyone," one soldier said. "Things just happened. Explosions from nowhere. Equipment breaking. Like the forest itself was fighting us." Thex did not believe in magic, but he was beginning to wonder what kind of enemy could move so unseen and strike so precisely. Marcus was already planning his next move. He had studied the hegemony base carefully and found its biggest weakness. They depended on energy from their ships to power everything. Cut the power, and their advanced weapons would stop working. But the power generators were heavily guarded and protected by force fields. "How do we get close?" Zyra asked when Marcus explained his plan. Marcus showed her the answer. He had built a device that looked like a simple metal box. Inside were chemicals from his ship, mixed with minerals from the forest. "Electromagnetic pulse," Marcus explained. "Shuts down electronics temporarily. Will it work on hegemony technology?" Only one way to find out. They waited until the middle of the night, then moved toward the base. Marcus had learned the guard patterns and timing. But this would be the most dangerous part yet. As they got close to the generator building, Zyra whispered, "Marcus, if this does not work, we will both die." Marcus looked at her with that same calm expression he always had. "Zyra, humans have a saying. Sometimes, you have to risk everything to save anything." He activated his device and threw it toward the generator building. The explosion was not loud, but every light in the hegemony base went out at once. In the darkness, alarms started screaming. Emergency lights flickered on, then went out again. Soldiers ran in all directions, trying to understand what had happened. Marcus and Zyra slipped away in the confusion. But they had proven something important. The mighty hegemony army was not as invincible as they thought. And somewhere in the dark forest, a single human was turning their advanced technology against them. One clever attack at a time. War Commander Thex stood in his powerless command center and realized he was no longer hunting a helpless princess. He was fighting a war. And for the first time in his career, he was not sure he was winning. The news of Marcus's attacks spread through the forest faster than fire. Other Velthari refugees had been hiding in the deep woods, too afraid to fight back. But now they came to find the mysterious force that was defeating hegemony soldiers. Zyra could hardly believe it when the first group appeared at their camp. 5 of her people, thin and scared but alive. They had been running from hegemony patrols for weeks. "Princess," an older male named Keth said, bowing low. "We heard impossible stories. They say you command forest spirits that make hegemony weapons useless." Zyra looked at Marcus, who was sharpening a knife by their fire. To her people, his simple tools and cunning tactics might seem like magic, not spirits, Zyra said. Something better. Knowledge. Over the next few days, more refugees found them. Soon they had almost 30 Velthari in their hidden camp. Marcus watched them with interested eyes. These people had the same advanced minds as Zyra, but they had been broken by running and hiding. Can you teach them? Zyra asked Marcus quietly. Marcus looked at the refugees. They were engineers, artists, scientists, smart people who had forgotten how to be strong. Can they learn? He asked back. Zyra thought about her own journey. A month ago, she could not make fire or find food. Now she could move through the forest like a ghost and set traps that fooled experienced soldiers. Yes, she said. They can learn. Marcus began training the Velthari in small groups. He taught them to make simple weapons from forest materials. He showed them how to hide and move quietly. Most importantly, he taught them to think like fighters instead of victims. Your enemy expects you to run, Marcus told them, so do not run. Your enemy thinks you are weak, so be strong in ways they do not understand. The Velthari were quick learners once they stopped being afraid. Their advanced minds could understand complex tactics easily. They just needed someone to show them that fighting back was possible. Within a week, Marcus had turned a group of scared refugees into the beginning of a resistance movement. That was when Emperor Kethvar arrived. Zyra felt the ground shake as massive ships landed in the forest, much bigger than Thex's warships. These were the royal vessels of the Velthari Empire, made of living crystal and powered by technologies that could reshape matter itself. My father, Zyra whispered, watching the beautiful ships descend from the sky. Marcus stood beside her. Are you ready? Zyra touched the crystal pendant around her neck. It had begun to glow again, just faintly. Being around other Velthari was reactivating the connection to their shared consciousness. But for the first time, Zyra did not want that connection. She had learned to think for herself. I am ready, she said. Emperor Kethvar came to the forest with 1,000 soldiers and enough firepower to burn the entire continent. But he also came with something else. A message that he wanted to speak with his daughter. The meeting happened in a clearing where 3 paths crossed. Ancient Velthari law said this was neutral ground where enemies could talk safely. Zyra walked into the clearing wearing simple forest clothes, with Marcus beside her. Across from them, Emperor Kethvar waited in his ceremonial armor, surrounded by guards. Zyra's father looked older than she remembered. The past month had aged him. Daughter, he said formally. I have come to bring you home. This is my home now, Zyra replied, gesturing to the forest around them. Kethvar's eyes moved to Marcus. And this is your human pet? Zyra felt anger rise in her chest, but Marcus touched her arm gently. Stay calm, his touch said. This is my friend, Zyra said. He saved my life when my own family cast me out. You were cast out for good reason, Kethvar said. Your selfishness has brought war to our people. War Commander Thex is furious that his soldiers keep disappearing. He blames us for harboring enemies. His soldiers disappear because they came hunting innocent people, Zyra said. We only defended ourselves. Kethvar laughed, but there was no joy in it. You defended yourselves? You, and what army? That was when the forest around them came alive. Velthari refugees appeared from behind every tree. They moved quietly and carried simple weapons, but their eyes burned with new confidence. 30 had become 60. 60 had become more than 100, and they all looked to Zyra as their leader. Kethvar stared in shock. Impossible. These are artists and engineers. They do not know how to fight. They know now, Marcus said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken. Kethvar studied the small human who had turned his daughter into a rebel leader. You taught them this? I taught them to remember what they already knew, Marcus replied. Your people are not weak. They just forgot how to be strong. Strength without wisdom is worthless, Kethvar said. You have turned my people into savages. Zyra stepped forward. Father, look around you. Really look. Kethvar looked at the Velthari refugees again. Yes, they carried weapons and moved like soldiers. But they still had the grace and intelligence of their people. They had not become savages. They had become something new. They learned to fight, Zyra continued. But they also learned to choose. To think for themselves instead of just following orders. To stand up for what is right, even when it is dangerous. Pretty words, Kethvar said. But Thex has 20 warships. What can your forest warriors do against that? Marcus spoke again. Emperor, your daughter asks the wrong question. The right question is, what can 20 warships do against an entire people who refuse to surrender? Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You speak of rebellion against impossible odds. I speak of choosing your own destiny instead of letting others choose it for you, Marcus replied. In the distance, explosions echoed through the forest. War Commander Thex was trying to burn down the woods to flush out the resistance fighters. But the Velthari had learned Marcus's lessons well. They faded deeper into the forest, striking back at supply lines and communication posts. This will never end, Kethvar said. Thex will not stop until he has Zyra as his wife, or sees our entire civilization destroyed. Then maybe it is time to stop running from Thex, Zyra said. She looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Then she faced her father with new authority in her voice. Father, I challenge War Commander Thex to single combat. Winner takes all. Kethvar's eyes went wide. Daughter, he will kill you. Maybe, Zyra said calmly. But if I win, the hegemony leaves our people alone. And our people remember that they have the right to choose their own leaders. Marcus stepped closer to Zyra. She will not fight alone. Kethvar looked back and forth between his daughter and the human. This is madness. This is hope. Zyra corrected. The challenge was sent to War Commander Thex, who accepted immediately. He thought he would be fighting a weak princess, who had been living in the forest like an animal. He was very wrong. The combat took place the next day, in the same clearing where Zyra had faced her father. Thex came in full battle armor, with energy weapons. Zyra came with simple forest clothes and tools Marcus had made for her. But she also came with something Thex had never faced before. She came with the absolute determination of someone who had learned to think for herself. The fight was short but vicious. Thex had superior weapons and armor, but Zyra had superior knowledge of the terrain and tactics. She fought the way Marcus had taught her. Not fair, but smart. When Thex lay defeated in the dirt, Zyra stood over him with a blade at his throat. Do you yield? She asked. Thex looked up at this princess who had become something he did not understand. Someone who could outfight a career warrior while fighting for principles instead of conquest. I yield, he said. The hegemony ships left that day. But more importantly, the Velthari people had learned something that would change their civilization forever. They had learned that they did not have to accept what others chose for them. They could make their own choices, even when those choices were difficult and dangerous. Emperor Kethvar offered his daughter the throne, but Zyra declined. Our people do not need another ruler who makes all the decisions, she said. They need leaders who help them make good decisions for themselves. The Velthari Empire began changing that day. Not through conquest or technology, but through a simple idea that one human had brought with him from the stars. The idea that every person had the right to choose their own path. Marcus eventually repaired his ship and continued his mission to warn other worlds about hegemony expansion. But he left behind something more valuable than any military report. He left behind a people who had remembered how to be free. And in the deep forest where it all began, Zyra built not a palace, but a school. A place where Velthari from across the empire could come to learn the most important lesson of all. How to be strong enough to choose hope over fear, even when the future was uncertain. The human who crashed in their forest had done more than save a princess. He had awakened an entire civilization to the power of individual choice and courage. And that was a revolution that would spread across the stars.